What's going on, everybody? This is Joe Harper with Reformed Truther Ministries. In today's video, we are talking about the alien breeding program. This is a topic that I'm really fired up today to talk about. I'm excited to talk about, but this is a topic that is a serious topic and it is an important topic because we are going to be talking about the number one agenda of Satan's war against the Christian church and against humanity as a whole. We're going to be talking about one of the most important topics that's going on in the world today, even though it is still largely covered up and behind the scenes. And we're going to be talking about something that every single discerning Christian needs to understand if he is to discern the signs of the times and to be like the men of Issachar, understanding the times that they are living in so they know what to do. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this is an important topic. I've talked about the breeding program to some extent in videos such as my video titled UFO Disclosure, but we're going to be going into more detail today, and we're going to be talking about how this relates to what I believe, how it relates to Bible prophecy, and how it relates to the war that is going on, the spiritual war between the church and Satan. So that's really where we're going to be going today in today's video with Reformed Truther Ministries. So recently I got back from New Mexico, and that was my expedition researching the Greys, the alien phenomenon, and the UFO phenomenon, the alien agenda. We were able to research all of that, and that is all recorded in our video titled Hunting After the Greys in New Mexico. You can watch that on my channel. And what we were able to do is actually go to ground zero to where this phenomenon largely exploded into the American consciousness. And we were able to go to Roswell, go to the International UFO Museum and Research Center, where they did a great job of presenting everything related to this phenomenon. And we were actually able to go to the crash site and do actual boots on the ground research where the crash took place in 1947. And we're also able to go up to Dulce, New Mexico, and to explore and research the claims of a deep underground military base there where the Greys are housed, with the understanding and the knowledge of the American government collaborating with those, quote, gray aliens. So that was a great expedition, and that was something that was, I felt, very important. I meant throughout this year, most of the research I did was into the giant mounds in the mid, and went to a number of giant mounds primarily in the Midwest, and I also did a lot of research into Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and all of that stuff relating to Genesis 6 and the Nephilim phenomenon. But as I was praying, I felt very strongly that God was impressing upon me to focus an expedition on the alien phenomenon, on the Greys. And like I've said before in other videos, they are not extraterrestrials, they are not our space boaters, but I have been starting to refer to them as demonic Nephilim hybrids. They are under Satan's command, they are part of Satan's kingdom, and they are being used by Satan, by his army of fallen angels, that these Greys are under them and being used by them to fight the spiritual war against not only the Christian church, but humanity as a whole. So it was so important to go and do that on the ground, frontline research into this important topic, because this is one of the most relevant things going on today in the Christian church. And ladies and gentlemen, the Christian church is by and large asleep at the wheel. They have their heads so deep in the sand that they don't want to talk about anything related to the spiritual war that's going on. They don't want to talk about the work of groups like the Jesuits and the Illuminati and the secret societies. They don't want to talk about the deep state, the shadow government. They don't want to talk about the cover up of UFOs. They don't want to talk about the cover up of things related to the biblical giants, the Nephilim, Sasquatch, cryptids, all of these things. The phenomenon of all this spiritual darkness is exploding across the world. They are trying to cover it up from the masses. And even though there are pockets of faithful Christians that are trying to talk about this, trying to bring the truth to others, there are pockets of faithful Christians trying to blow the whistle on what is going on. They are often mocked, ridiculed, and persecuted by the very brethren who should be joining them in this fight. The Christian church is asleep at the wheel, and we need to try to help our brethren to wake up and get in the fight. So that's what this video is about. That's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to be covering three things in the rest of this video. You can tell I'm a little fired up today. I'm going to be talking about the congressional hearings that have been going on. I'm going to be giving some behind the scenes commentary on my expedition to New Mexico that I already mentioned, and we're going to be talking about the alien breeding program in more detail. So there's a lot to talk about today related to UFOs and the Greys, and we're going to just be going right at it. So obviously, as I just said, there have been congressional hearings in the House relating to UFOs, and a lot of that footage has been made available to the public. Those were not closed door hearings, but they were public hearings that were videotaped, and lots of that has been posted online. And also, some of the written statements of some of the whistleblowers that spoke have been made available online. And I've been able to fortunately watch some of that footage, and not only watch the video footage, but I've also watched the commentaries of various ufologists or Nephilim researchers that work on UFOs and aliens, and I've been able to do some work of a deep dive into some of that. And some of it was interesting. It's not completely dissimilar to other congressional hearings that have gone on about this topic in recent years. Some of the men that spoke, former Rear Admiral Timothy Gallaudet and Luis Elizondo, both spoke, and they essentially confirmed what has been said in previous congressional hearings, that there are crafts are real, the UAP phenomenon is real, that there has been contact with these things with elements of our military. Pilots in the air have come into contact with these craft, and that they also confirmed that there are elements within our government working to keep this information from the American public. So all of that is extremely interesting. It is confirmatory of what people who have been studying the UFO phenomenon have been saying for many decades. Obviously, when we talk about it, it's possible that these men could be agent provocateurs providing disinformation to the public. But part of the reason why I think that there is at least some level of credibility to what he's saying is because they are confirming something that has been independently verified by ufologists going back to 1947, if not even earlier than that. So people have been talking about this for a long time, and it is amazing, ladies and gentlemen, that we are in an era where this is actually being talked about publicly in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., that our government is finally moving away from the ironclad policy of cover up, and there is a slow rollout of disclosure going on. And they're trying to do it on their terms, they're trying to stay ahead of the narrative. I think the phenomenon is exploding so much in the world that it has gotten to a point where they are being, to some degree, forced to acknowledge some of this, because it is getting to the point where people are getting past the ability, like they are getting to a point with the technology and the smartphones and the explosion of sightings, that many people in the public are seeing through the cover up that goes back to the 1940s and 50s, and they are seeing that this is real, and therefore the American government to some degree is being forced to talk about it. And all of that is going on. And so the fact that we're in a day and age where, even though they aren't disclosing everything, even though they're being very careful about what they're saying, the fact that we're able to watch videos online of congressional hearings confirming this stuff is really explosive in its implications for the world. It's powerful, and it's just amazing that we're living in a day and age where that's actually going on. So they've talked about the crafts. They've talked about the fact that there are elements within the government that are actually covering this up and obfuscating it. And these men are actually saying that we need to work. They were saying to the members of the House conducting the hearings that we need to be better about bringing greater transparency to the American public to restore trust. That's what these men actually said in these videotapes. So that's really something that is really interesting. Now, like I said, I wanted to provide a little bit more commentary on my expedition to the American Southwest. I would recommend that you, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch my video, Hunting After the Greys in New Mexico. It was a great expedition. God really blessed it. I think with every expedition I do, there's always in one sense you're always hungry to find more and discover more, but that doesn't change the fact that God really blessed, and there were some real great nuggets that I found. And it's always good to just to get those boots on the ground, to go to the actual places where this stuff has been going on. Is always, it's just so different than staying being the armchair researcher, staying in the books. When you actually go out and get into the field and go to the places, it just gives you greater perspective on things and insight. There's little every place I go to, there's usually a little nugget somewhere, that there's a little clue that God gives me, or a little nugget that I find, that you have to travel. You work so hard to get to the place, and then it's usually the little clue, the little kernel that you get, and you take it, and you take that and you weave it into the tapestry of what you're finding. So it was just really a great trip. Day one, I went down to Roswell, and first I went to the museum and the UFO International Research Center, and they have an outstanding research library there. The research library was really good, and the exhibits that they put on were excellent. They talked about a lot of things, not just about the Roswell crash in 1947, but they talked a lot about the entire UFO phenomenon as a whole, and they did a really good job with really great exhibits talking about this. Now, obviously, this is all from more of a secular perspective. This isn't a Christian Nephilim Genesis 6 narrative perspective. So obviously you got to glean from that perspective. But regardless, there's still a lot you can learn. They talked about the various types of encounters with UFOs and aliens: first kind, second kind, third kind, fourth kind, and fifth kind. They talked about they talked about the organization Majestic 12 and their work in the UFO cover up. That was really cool. They actually had the actual radio broadcast of 8 from ABC radio that was broadcast out to the public, and I was able to capture that audio on my phone and incorporate it into my video. That was really cool because you're actually hearing what was said to the public and hearing how they actually broadcast this out, that ABC got this report from the Air Force, and they heard, and this stuff was put into the papers, and this was broadcast out on the radio before the cover up went out a couple days later, saying that it was a weather balloon. So to hear that actual radio broadcast was really, really cool. Um, the the museum talked about the alien transplants, and it was interesting that when I was looking at the exhibit, they were saying that the alien implants that are put into abductees, even though they're extremely rare, they were claiming that they served a different purpose than they weren't a tracking device as is common believed, but they served other purposes. That was extremely interesting. But one of the most interesting things I saw at the museum was they were talking about these ancient Hopi petroglyphs, and they showed pictures of these petroglyphs, and I videotaped these and put these into my video, and they were showing these depictions of gray aliens on this ancient Hopi art that's hundreds of years old. And that really was confirming to me my thesis of these are spiritual beings, these demonic Nephilim hybrids, and that they are these aliens have been on our earth for hundreds if not thousands of years. They're part of Satan's kingdom, and I felt like the fact that those are being depicted, these aren't aliens that showed up on our planet from outer space in 1947. They've been here for a long, long time. And even people who would seem to be in the know, like Tucker Carlson, who portrays himself as a conservative, is probably Illuminati controlled opposition in my opinion. Just like a lot of these so-called conservatives that are aligning with Trump right now, even the Joe Rogans and the Alex Jones. There's a lot of in the alternative media sphere. There's a lot of controlled opposition. But Tucker Carlson actually said that these are spiritual entities that have been on our Earth for thousands of years, and I think that there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. I think he's in the know to some degree. But that little nugget, and they were showing these petroglyph paintings have been shown on shows like Ancient Aliens and whatever else. But the fact that I was able to look at those pictures of those petroglyphs, and I felt like it was really lining up with the research I did before I actually got out there to New Mexico. That little clue, that little nugget of truth was super helpful, and it was really confirmatory. And it was also just talking about it. It was outstanding to get out to the crash site. It really was in the middle of nowhere. I had to drive down some dirt paths in the rental car. Car got a little dirty. I mean, it didn't get damaged or anything, but we kind of had to make a decision. Like, did we really want to go out to the crash? And we had to drive through cattle gates. And when I got out there, it was really in the middle of nowhere. And I really there's this area there where it's the debris field, and I came down the one dirt road, and then I had the debris field, and then I was able to kind of come at it from a different dirt road, and so I kind of was able to see the field from multiple angles, and I videotaped it because I mean everybody says that when the crash happened, the debris dispersed over a relatively large area. I mean, you would think the craft, goes down. You think it's all you would in your mind. You kind of imagine it's contained to a somewhat small space, but I think a lot of the debris from the craft actually it dispersed, and so many people who have studied this have said that. So, I mean, how wide that dispersal really is, I'm not completely sure, but like I know that these fields I was at, like I know that it was right there, the actual place, and just to go there and be there, just like anything, like videos and pictures never do fully justice compared to being in a place, and it was just really neat to get out there, film that, and to really be at ground zero and just be able to look at where it was and imagine what it would have looked like for the craft to come down. All of that was just really, really great frontline research. And I would have loved to have walked around more and explored more. They had gotten a bunch of snow, which is actually somewhat rare for that part of New Mexico. And the fields were very, very muddy, and there was snow, and it was just a mess. So I did explore a little bit, but obviously I didn't go out as much as you would have, maybe in a drier time. But it was still great to go out there, and then to go up to driving up to Dulce on day two was just it was great, and just to be able to drive up into the mountains. It's one thing when you're reading about this deep underground military base under the mesa. When you get up there and you look at the mountains and you look at the hills around Dulce, and you try to get a feel of where it would be, what's going on here, like it just once again, the type of research to actually go to the place and look around and to really get an understanding of what's going on, even though I may not have all the details. It could pave the ground potentially for further research down the road. It's just something about going and getting your bearings that there was just so much information I was able to glean. I have a lot more understanding of what this stuff looks like in the state of New Mexico, and it could potentially pave the ground for further research if the Lord ever called me to go back. And there's just a lot of great things that are going on with this expedition. So all of that was just the Lord blessed the trip. There was a lot of great things that I gleaned and learned, and I'm still going back through the archives of all the pictures and the video I took, and I'm going back and processing everything and putting it into the archives of my research, as it were, and it's going to serve me in the future. And we're laying the groundwork with all these topics that we did this past year, whether it's giant mounds, Sasquatch. I've been doing a lot of reading on demonology connected to my studies with the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, and now doing a lot of research into the gray aliens. Like all of this is laying the groundwork for future research, and we're really in a good place. But this brings me to I want to talk more about the alien breeding program today. um, as I've said before, we're talking about the gray aliens, and there are actually a number of different type of aliens. Sometimes there's reference to what are called the Nordics, which the Nordics always are depicted as fair-skinned human beings that they're usually depicted as males, very handsome or very beautiful or comely in terms of their physical appearance. They look very handsome or attractive, and they are usually depicted as very fair skinned, almost as if they were Scandinavian, and that's just what the reports say. And I think that the Nordics are just fallen angels. And then there's usually reference to the insectolins, which are probably the ones that are talked about the least. But the most commonly talked about aliens are the grays, the quote gray aliens. And usually when you talk about the grays, there are talks of the shorter ones, the 3 to 4 feet grays. And then there's discussion about grays that are as tall as human beings, if not even a little taller. And with those two subsections of the grays are the ones that are primarily responsible for this breeding program. Now, according to some ufologists, such as Dr. David Jacobs, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about Dr. Dave Jacobs' book today called Walking Among Us, the Alien Plan to Control Humanity. Now, he wrote this from a secular perspective, but once again, he has gleaned a lot. And this book, if you're going to study this phenomenon, as a Christian, you need to understand it's written from a secular perspective. But that being said, this is one of the most important books you need to read on this phenomenon. This book is very, very important. And even some of the all the primary Nephilim researchers that study this that I've listened to, they all have said Dr. Jacob's book, Walking Among Us, is an extremely important read. And he has actually interviewed abductees, and he has taken all the information and he's cataloged it, and he's figured out what is going on. And what everybody has said, everybody who's doing research into this has confirmed that there is a breeding program, and it is nefarious, and it is evil, and its purpose is to take over the human race. This is Endgame, ladies and gentlemen. This is Satan's plan for takeover. This is Sauron in the Lord of the Rings planning his comeback to take over. That's what this is. And what Satan right now, and I was going to talk about this more in the end of the video, but I'll highlight it here. Satan right now is building an army. He's building an army, and he is getting ready to make his move to complete his takeover of the world. And I think all of this is leading to the Battle of Armageddon. And that Satan is preparing an army, and with everything he's doing, he's getting humanity to mess with the genetics, the transhumanism, the alien agenda, the proliferation of cryptids, the proliferation of all of this genetic tampering and spiritual evil. All of these things are different subsections of this plan that Satan is gathering his army for this battle. And I don't think we're going to get raptured out of here before it happens. I think the church is going to have to fight and win this battle. But that's anyway, I digress. We'll get to that. But anyway, with the alien breeding program, Dr. David Jacobs is one of the primary research into this phenomenon. Now, it needs to be understood that I want to make sure I said this, that Dr. Jacobs in his own book admits that some of the testimony he took was he used hypnotic techniques to get through what are called the screen memories, because many abductees have what is called screen memories, and many researchers have used some form of hypnosis, or to put them into a hypnotic sleep state in order to get them to discuss this stuff and to get through the screen memories. That has led some people to discount the phenomenon and say that it is not going on at all. What I want to say at this point, just acknowledging this, is that even in my own mind, when I read his book and he admitted to that, that even gave me some pause. But it also needs to be understood that there have been many, many abductees that have talked about this, normally, as I am talking to you, completely cognizant, and their admittance of what is going on with the abductions have not been used by these techniques. So not everybody who has talked about this has discussed it under the use of those type of hypnotic techniques. So that needs to be said. The screen memory phenomenon is real. Many abductees have screen memories, so they don't even, in some instances, they don't even remember what happened. And the Greys are doing that in order to keep the program secret. And men and women both are abducted from their beds, usually at night. They're taken up into the UFO craft. This has often been, we can kind of imagine what this looks like. They're levitated from the bed. We've seen this depicted in the movies in Hollywood. And they're taken up to the craft, and the gray aliens are there. Sometimes many people are laid on operating tables or whatever equivalent that is, and they are performing medical procedures on these people. And it's usually with the men connected to the collection of humans of sperm. Pardon me, I'm trying to keep it as technical as possible. And with women, they usually sometimes are collecting eggs, and sometimes the procedures are related to the impregnation of alien women. Now, I know that may sound crazy to some people who have not looked into the phenomenon, and this is where I have to say, if you think what I'm saying is crazy, you need to understand Genesis 6, the Genesis 6 narrative of the fallen angels coming down to the earth, breeding with human women and creating a race of hybrids that we know as the Nephilim giants. If you do not understand Genesis 6, good luck trying to understand this phenomenon, because you're going to be lost like a deer in the headlights. You're not going to know which way to turn, which way to go. You're not going to be able to move forward in understanding this phenomenon as a Christian, because this is the same thing that was going on in the antediluvian world. All the stuff that's going on right now is the same type of thing that was going on in the antediluvian world. Now, all that being said, that sometimes these women are impregnated and sometimes they will be abducted again. Um, Sometimes months later, 3, 4 months later, and then the fetus or the baby will be taken from their wombs and then they'll be returned to their homes. And some of these women have actually testified that they will be brought back onto the crafts or to the deep underground military bases, and these aliens will have them training these hybrid children. And they're trying to create a form of hybrid that Dr. David Jacobs calls hubrids, which is another step down from you have the grays and then you have hybrids and you have the hubrids. And these hubrids are being bred to look just like us, and even though they have the Greys aliens DNA, they all, for all extensive purposes, look like humans. And what the Greys are doing, the purpose of the breeding program is to insert them into human society. So this is like the Borg in Star Trek, but it's backwards. So if you've ever watched Star Trek, the Borg say, "We will assimilate you into the collective." That's their way of taking everybody over, is to assimilate everybody else into their collective. Well, it's backwards because the Greys are inserting themselves into our society for the purpose of takeover. It's kind of like a parasite taking over, and they are doing this so that instead of taking over through overt means, it's a process, a more covert process of takeover. As I was saying, these women, they'll be taken, they'll be impregnated, they'll be abducted again, and the baby will be removed from the womb. But sometimes these women are brought back to train the hybrid children, or the hybrid children, whatever term you want to use, and they are trying to teach them social skills, because these hybrids need to learn how to integrate into human society. So they need to learn how to be able to talk to humans in social settings, parties, get-togethers, gatherings. They need to learn how to drive a car, what a fridge is, learn about how to clothe themselves, how to go about day to day, learning how to being able to operate at a level. And this is already going on, ladies and gentlemen. And some of these hybrids have human handlers. There is some type of a connection to the elements in the deep state, in the American government, and even the secret societies. And I think this all ties. I think there's a connection between the alien breeding program and the transhuman agenda that has not been talked about very extensively. I will get to that in a minute. But this is ongoing, and this is the tip of the spear, and this is the threat that we are facing. And this, what you need to understand is that this breeding program is very far along. It is very well advanced. The timer is ticking. We are on the clock and we are behind the clock. And the Christian church, I said this earlier in the video, that should be at the tip of the spear of fighting, because these quote aliens, they're not extraterrestrials from outer space. Learn about the firmament, ladies and gentlemen. And it is these quote aliens, they are under the command of Satan. Satan is breeding an army. He's getting ready for Armageddon. That is what my opinion, and that Armageddon will be a battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. That is what is coming. That is the next thing. And this battle will ultimately lead to the destruction of the satanic Illuminati empire that is centered. I believe it's centered in the Vatican, Mystery Babylon. It goes back not only to the Tower of Babel and the antediluvian world and all of that ancient paganism, occultism that has persisted throughout the center. It is centered today in the city that sits on 7 mountains or 7 hills. It is the city of Rome. But that Satan is preparing his army because he knows that he needs to make his move soon. That is what is happening, and that these aliens are under their control. The Christian church, which should be at the tip of the spear of fighting against Satan's devices, is asleep at the wheel, and we need to wake people up. We need to have a sense of urgency about this. This is important. This is something that we should be taking seriously. It's something that needs to be talked about. It's not going to go away because we ignore it. In this breeding program, this program is very advanced, and they are working to insert themselves into more and more levers of American society and societies across the world, and they're working for takeover. And I think these things are essentially, in theological terms, soulless. They're soulless entities for all intents and purposes, and probably would be the equivalent of what we would call sociopaths. These people, these beings are going to be devoid of conscience. They're going to be capable of great evil. They already are. They already are. It's amazing. I was listening. You listen to interviews of Nephilim researchers who have talked about this, and these hubrids. They have sometimes they'll have human handlers, and what they'll do, they'll go to places like Walmart at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, when nobody's there, and these handlers will be there helping these hybrids to integrate themselves into human society. But go because what do you got to do? You got to be able to go shopping at a place like Walmart, and they're still working to integrate them in. But this is going to accelerate at a faster and faster pace, and we're so far behind. It's already going on. These hybrids already exist. They're walking amongst us. That's the title of Dr. David Jacobs' book. They're walking amongst us, and most of us have no idea. We're not prepared for the reality. This is something that we need to be praying about. It's something that we need to be taking seriously, and we need to up our game because the people on the other side, they got money, resources, they're motivated. They've been able to keep the secret for the public for decades. And the Christians on the other side, we need to fight hard because this is coming. It really is coming, and it's not going to go away. So this is what's going on. This is the breeding program. They're working to create these hybrids. If you've heard of the phenomenon of the black-eyed kids, I think it's connected to this, to the breeding program. And like I said, Satan he's gathered. This is like the equivalent, like I said, Lord of the Rings. Sauron comes back the second time around. He gathers all his armies together before he makes his big attack on Gondor. This is like the forces of Mordor, not only the orcs, but the cave trolls and the evil men and the corsairs and all these forces of evil are gathering together. In our state parks, there's been an explosion of cryptid sightings. Things like Sasquatch have gone up, and the Dogman sightings have gone up. And there's these other entities they're amassing in our state parks, and most of us don't even know it. That's connected to this. The UFO phenomena has exploded. There have been other type of cryptid sightings that have exploded. Wendigo, skinwalkers, whatever. All of this stuff is amassing. Occult activity is increasing across the world because witchcraft is increasing across the world. So demonic activity. The more the fallen angels and the demons, they are able to have greater access to our sphere of existence when we as humans give it to them. When we summon them, when we allow them into our plane of existence, they are given more power over our world. They have greater ability to perform deceiving signs and wonders. This is a spiritual war. This is a spiritual war, and this is what's going on. And I don't think the church is going to get raptured out of here before it hits. I think we're going to have to go through this. That's what I believe. Um, we're coming towards an apocalyptic, cataclysmic battle, and this is something that we're going to have to fight. One of the last things I want to talk about in this video is I want to talk about the connection between the alien agenda, the alien phenomenon, which once again, I don't believe they're extraterrestrials, they're not space brothers, but I'm calling it the alien agenda. I want to talk about the connection between that and transhumanism. You know, what's interesting I've been researching this phenomenon really the past 12 months. And one of the things I did was I actually watched a bunch of episodes of the X-Files for the first time, and I never really watched the show. I mean, sure, I'd seen bits and pieces of it of YouTube, but I actually rented the show and was able to go through a lot of the episodes, what are called the mythology episodes, the episodes specifically connected to the narrative of UFOs and aliens, which is the largest theme in the show. They talk about a lot of other type of paranormal and supernatural stuff, but the aliens is kind of the bread and butter, the heart and center of the show. So I watched a lot of the mythology episodes. I watched some other ones too, but I really went through the mythology episodes. And obviously, a lot of it is fiction, but most people who have studied the alien phenomenon and the UFO phenomenon know that part of the reason why the show was so successful is they took a lot of real stuff from history in the current day and they transported it into fiction, and that's why they converted it into a good narrative, and that's part of the reason why the show resonates so much is because a lot of it is real. There's a lot of predictive programming in the show. Like all of our media, we're just been swarmed with all this stuff. So obviously you got to be careful when you're gleaning, but there's a lot that I was able to really pull out of the show. And one of when you watch the X-Files, one of the great themes in the show is that there is this evil organization called the Syndicate. And the syndicate, they're essentially this group of elites. They used to be connected to the government, then they became a private organization, and they are aware of the alien presence in the show. They know about the Greys. They know about the Greys' desire to take over the world, and they strike a deal with the Greys that they give some of their children to the Greys to be. They allow the Greys to abduct some of their children, and they're in return they're given an alien um, an alien body, a fetus, so that the humans can start working to create alien human hybrids. This is probably sounding familiar. And the Syndicate, they show that they're powered. They're the shadow government in the show, working to. They have their agents like the Smoking Man and the FBI, and they're always able to put pressure on people in the government or anybody who's a whistleblower, anybody who's trying to discover the truth of the alien phenomenon on the show is being suppressed by the syndicate. And I think the syndicate is meant to represent the shadow government, the forces within our government, and I think connected to the secret societies and the Illuminati ultimately, that are aware of the phenomenon, that are working with the powers of darkness. I'm talking about real life here. And the syndicate is the fictional portrayal of that element within our government that has worked to cover it up. And there's an element within our government that is working with the Greys to promote this breeding program. So we have traitors in our midst. Once again, guys, if you haven't studied all this stuff, this sounds as crazy can be, but when you've done the research and you know it's real, you cannot come to any other conclusion. And it's really this is the connection though to transhumanism. In the show, the syndicate, they give their children to the Greys. And the deal they strike is that they're essentially going to allow in the show, they're going to allow the Greys to take over, but that their children will be allowed to live as alien human hybrids. Well, that kind of sounds like transhumanism, doesn't it? A lot of this is predictive programming. And I think that a lot of these powerful Illuminati families, they are they believe that they are descended from the gods, some of them. And obviously you can get caught up in endless genealogies, but these powerful families, we know who some of them are, the Rothschilds and these other powerful families connected to banking and government and whatever else. They think they're the descendants of the Watchers, and they are very comfortable aiding this agenda under their leader, Satan. And they think that they are going to be able to live on in this post human state. That's why they're promoting transhumanism and promoting this alien breeding program. They're okay with that, because that's gonna their goal is that they want to be a part of this new hybrid race, this new superior ascendant hybrid race that they're trying to create. And what's left of normal humanity will just be, if not killed off, will be descended to a slave race. This is satanic occultism at its finest. And what the show, The X Files, is portraying is predictive programming. The alien agenda meets transhumanism, and this is why I say part of the reason why I created my channel, or why I wrote my book, The Hidden Enemies, the Antichrist, the New World Order, and the Hidden History of the World, is because so many people in the church, they're suffering from what I call worldview deficiency. They're so like because if you there's so many of these topics, and you need to research them all independently before you can start to put them together and see the tapestry. And if you're behind on all this stuff, when you're hearing somebody talking about it all connecting together, it just sounds like crazy talk. But when you actually do the work, okay, what's the deal with giants? What's the deal with the gray aliens? What's the deal with the secret societies? What's the deal with the shadow government? And you're able to put it together, and you see the tapestry, and you go, whoa, you realize what's really going on. So many Christians they haven't. You need to study history. You need to study current events, and because otherwise you're just going to be throwing stones at the people blowing the whistle, and that's not good for anybody. But anyway, I digress. I've made that point 3 or 4 times at this point in this video. But the breeding program is real. They are working to insert themselves into humanity for the purpose of takeover, and we need to be praying against this. We need to be working to expose this and to figure out a plan to fight back as best we can. Obviously, this is a supernatural battle, and we're gonna need the omnipotent power of God to fight this battle. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. We need to rely on the sovereign, omnipotent power of God, the power of the Holy Spirit. And because this stuff, all of this demonic Nephilim hybrid activity is able to be overcome by the power of Jesus Christ. Alien abduction experiences have been stopped by the power of Jesus. And so many Christians have come out of the abduction horrors and have testified to that very fact. I would say that's indisputable that so many credible Christians have said that there is power in of the name of Jesus over these preternatural alien abduction experiences. So much more could be said on this. I'm going to stop here. But guys, we need to understand this phenomenon more. If you understand the reality of what's going on, that's why research from the other Christian ministries that are doing this, or even the work of that I'm doing with RTM, is so important because we need to talk to these abductees more. You know, we need to get this narrative out more. We need to be blowing the whistle on this, and we need to be getting this information out to the public. And there's so much more that could be said about this, but guys, we need to be working together and networking with as many like-minded brothers and sisters in Christ as we can to fight this battle, because we need each other. So if you understand, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you think this is important, if you see the reality of what I'm saying, please consider supporting the channel, subscribing to the channel, supporting this work, support the work of other solid Christian ministries talking about this from a biblical perspective, because we need to get the word out about this breeding program, about this alien agenda, and we need to understand what this is. This is part of Satan's plan, his end game for taking over the world. And that's really what it is. This is not a fictional movie. This isn't the X-Files. This is real life, and this is going on. And all of the ridicule of all the masses in the world isn't going to make this go away. So that's why I'm speaking urgently today. That's why I'm speaking with great earnestness and zeal and boldness, I pray, because we need to get this message out to everybody who needs to hear it. So that's really where I'm coming from. That's really where my heart is at. And that's really where this video is going to stop here today. So stay tuned to what's coming up next. There's more exciting stuff coming down the pike with Reformed Truth Through Ministry. So this is Joe Harper with RTM. God bless everybody. If you enjoyed this video, then check out our website at www.reformedtruther.com.